Welcome back to week 4 of PageMap's Silhouette Essentials 101. I'm Nicole Nowosad, and today we're wrapping things up in our 4-week course, and we're going to do a few things that are a little bit different. We're going to talk about paper conservation and filling in patterns with very little waste. We'll use the line tool. I'll also create layered offset titles, and I'll just quickly describe the difference between cutting versus cut edge in the cut settings window. So let's go ahead and get started by opening up our Silhouette software. So one of the cut files that is included in the PageMap's class is this floral background type of cut. And one thing you'll need to keep in mind when you're trying to fill in a background with a little bit of paper versus a lot is just a repetition of patterns. So obviously in this case you can see there's a flower that's repeated, and we've actually included one of those flowers separately here just to make things a little bit easier for you. But otherwise what you would do is trace that shape and start from there. But for now, we'll start with this flower shape that's included. And this is basically just a bunch of circles combined together to make a flower. But what I want to do is create a flower shape that will be one size so I can layer it in behind this flower design. So I'm just going to trace the outer edge just as we've done in other lessons. And you can see here, there's my outline shape. And I want to actually make it slightly smaller than the flower that it's going to go up behind. So I want to just choose an internal offset in the offset window, and I'm just going to make it just a tiny bit wider, and then I'm going to keep the smaller of the two of the offsets. So there you go, I have my filled out flower shape, and I'll just fill it out with red here just so you can be able to see the difference in a minute. And what I'm going to do is just center these two designs together just for the purpose only of showing you how it's going to look. And I'm going to set the red one to the back here. And that's just going to show you how it will look, what you'll see once you cut your designs out. So you'll still see that flower design on the top, but you'll get a colored background from whatever pattern paper or cardstock you choose. So now the next step is obviously to cut out that flower shape without using a lot of paper. So I'm just going to drag these off to the edge here. So now what we want to do is line these 4 red floral shapes, and I'm just going to copy and duplicate one into each corner of my silhouette mat. And I'm going to line my mat with 4 different papers so that I can just easily print them out on my silhouette, cut them out on my silhouette with 4 different papers. That way I'm not wasting a whole 12 by 12 sheet of pattern paper. Now if you want to create a flower that would be slightly smaller than the flower to maybe go on top of the silhouette cut, you could very easily do it with this option here. This flower here has a line width in the line style window you can see as 25 points. So all I need to do on this duplicate flower is create a smaller thickness for my line. So I'm just going to choose 15 points, and I'll color this in red. And it's as simple as just doing something like that and selecting the cut edge. You'll be able to see that the red will be just slightly smaller than the black. So I'm just going to line these up here in the center, and I'm going to layer them just for the purpose of showing you how it's going to look kind of when it's done. So the red will pop above this time, the design, and there'll be a slight rim around the edge of the black. So you could maybe cut this top red layer out of vellum, then you could have the black pattern of your background, and then you could have a pattern paper in the very back. So now I just want to show you another way that you can fill a pattern, such as this quatrefoil pattern I had in my design library. So I'm just going to take note here that I have 25 of these crosshatch shapes and 16 of the smaller little circle shapes here. And I'm going to release this compound path and just grab one of each of those 2 designs. So I'm going to just copy and paste those over to the side, or cut and paste them over to the side. And then I'm going to just move the rest of this off out of my way for now. And let's assume that I'm going to cut that background, the whole background, with a white cardstock, so that I want to fill the inside of the design with different patterns of paper. So I'm just going to drag this over to my workspace, and I'm going to go into the offset window and create an offset. Now, unlike last time where we created an offset that was smaller, this time I'm going to create an offset that's a little bit larger, and that means that that paper is going to just tuck underneath that quatrefoil background that's on the right hand side of my page. So I'm just going to select offset this time, and I'm going to go ahead and just choose the recommended offset that shows up. And then I'm going to delete the two innermost designs. So these two little skinny ones that I had started off in the beginning, I'm just going to delete those right away. Now it's just a matter of replicating these onto my page, and I can either go in the replicate window and just fill the page, or I can, like we did in the first example, just copy and paste and add these to each of the four corners of my mat. The only thing you really have to remember here is that the number of designs you want to cut. And what I like to do in this circumstance is, usually I do it this way with a design at each of the four corners, and I cut 4 different patterns at a time. And then, or you could cut a whole bunch out of one kind of pattern paper, or even just 2 pattern papers, and if you want. So the very last thing I'm going to show you today is how to create this pie chart using just the line tool and the ellipse tool in your Silhouette software. So the first thing you do is draw a circle shape with your elliptical tool, and it doesn't really matter how big or small the circle is, it's just something manageable for you to work with. Then I'm also going to turn my grid function on, and I'm going to line up the inside of this circle here with the grid. So I'm going to pick my grid. I'm just going to leave it here at 1 division. And that little small circle in the middle of the circle is the centermost point. And so I'm going to line that up just to my intersection of one of the grid points. It doesn't matter which one. I just want to have it lined up there so that I know it's easier for me to find the center of the circle. Now with my line drawing tool, I'm just going to click and hold down my shift key and drag all the way across the circle along that line, and now I've created a completely straight line. And I'll do the same thing from the top to the bottom of the circle, and I'm left with a circle with 2 lines throughout it. And I'm clicking here and not paying attention, and I'm adding 2 extra lines, so just ignore that. I'm going to delete those. Now the next thing we're going to do is use a tool we've used a few weeks ago, and it's the drawing a shape tool. And this one here, I'm just going to turn off the grid so it's easier to see. This draws a curved line. So I'm going to start off at one of these corners here in the center, and I'm going to hold down my shift key and click at the corner edge where the line meets my circle. And then I'm going to do the same thing up at the top where the corner line meets the circle, and back to the center again. And you can see that I have kind of a rounded triangle. Now, as we learned in lesson number 3, anytime you have points on the line, you can easily edit them. If you delete points, they will make your line straighter. And if you add points, it will help make your line more curved. So I'm just going to go ahead on the lines that should be straight and delete the points. And then I'm going to go onto the curved lines and add a few points and move some of the points around. And I'm also going to play around a little bit with some of these handles here, and I'm going to either make them flat in the point editing option, or I'm going to drag the handle in just so that it creates a straight line. If you feel like you have any extra points, you can go ahead and delete them, and then your line will become more straight. So at this point, it's just a matter of moving some of those lines around, and I'm just going to zoom in so you can see that better. And by double-clicking on the shape, you can access the points, or you can click on the point editing tool. So I'm just going to click and drag these little dots, and I'm going to line them up all along the edge of the circle that we drew earlier. And if you need to make adjustments to those little antennas on the edge of the points, you can do so quite easily. Just remember that the wider you pull out that antenna, the more of a curve or an arc you're going to have, and the smaller or thinner that antenna is going to be a sharper, more straight line. So you can very easily do this. It doesn't take a lot of time, and once you have a design like this made, you can easily save it and use it over and over again. So using the circle, just go ahead and change up the curve of some of those points. And there you go. And I'm just going to delete and straighten off this bottom edge here and play around a little bit with the points. I'm just going to bring this one up and close this handle off so it's nice and tight. Okay, now it's easier to see if I zoom out a little. So you can see here, hopefully you can see, I'll just fill it in, that we've drawn this quarter of a circle now. And from here, you could leave it as it is, or you can replicate it and make it into a full circle again, or you can create different pie pieces. So in this case, I'm going to actually replicate it and mirror it to the right, which makes an exact mirrored copy to the right of the design. And I'm just going to fill it with, not white, I'm going to fill it both shapes with clear, which looks like a crosshatch in the fill color option, just to make sure that I can see my overlap. If you choose white, you won't be able to see your overlap. So I'm going to go back and select both again and choose that see-through option. There we go. And now I'm just going to make sure that I can overlap them, and then I'm going to weld the two together. Okay, so now I have a half circle. So I'm just going to ungroup them and duplicate this and rotate it once so that it's even. And then I'm going to have a half circle and a quarter circle when I'm done. And that's my pie chart. Another thing I want to show you here is just how I created this ring for this cut file and how it's important to have the correct cut settings. So I'm just going to go ahead and draw a simple circle with my elliptical tool. And if you were just to draw this circle and create these rings and cut it out with the cut setting set to cut, you would just have a whole bunch of circles cut out of a page, but it would not show like circles, it would just show as cut marks. So I'm going to just click on this here and go to the cut window. And you can, I'm going to make the line style here a little bit wider first. I'll move this up to 6 points, which will make it just slightly thicker. And if you left this the way it is, with cut setting set to cut, it would just draw a thin cut line throughout the center of that thicker line. So you really want to make sure this is on cut edge for something like this, so that it cuts around the inside and the outside of that circle. And now I'm simply going to copy and paste several times the same design, just kind of overlapping them in different spots and keeping it all on the cut edge, so that in the end it's going to cut along the inside and outside edge of that circular shape. And in a case like this, if you welded it together at this point, it's just going to create one big blob. So that's probably not what you want to do at this point, unless you're looking to make a blob shape. So you really, in this case, want to choose that Make Compound path, which takes all those little designs and makes it into one. And now, because the cut settings are set to cut edge, you're not going to lose any of those little bits there. It's going to show up as a circle, a swirly circle type of cut. So that is one of the really important things. You need to pay attention in the cut settings, because otherwise, if your line is thicker and you have a thin line going through because it's set to cut, you're going to have the wrong thing cutting on your project. So there's one last thing that I do want to show you, and that is working with fonts. So it's something a little bit different than what we've been doing in this lesson, but I feel like it's something you need to know, and that's how to create different sorts of titles. So in week 1, we talked about welding a font together, and often it's quite easy just to weld that font by typing in the name of a word and then welding it together. But sometimes you have a font where all the letters don't line up together and you need to do a little bit of rotation. So that's what we're going to first talk about right now. So I've just typed out this word in the font that's called Sassy Font, and as you can see, nothing is overlapping, and everything's kind of tilted a little bit of a different way. So I've ungrouped all those letters, and I'm just going to one by one grab each of the letters and line them up over top of each other. You need to have that overlap when you're welding things together, like we've talked about before. So sometimes you need to do this, where you need to rotate a letter here and there just to make a part of that letter overlap with another one. So I'm just going to kind of fiddle around a little bit with the letter placement, just so that it makes sense. And sometimes when you're doing this, as you can see, I'm kind of going a bit of on a downward angle here, but that's okay. Later on, you can always rotate the whole word so that it is more of an up and down or straight across type of thing. But I find with scriptier fonts like this one here, they all don't line up properly anyway. So now that I have all my points overlapping, I'm just going to select this whole word, right click and choose weld, and you can see that I have the word everyday written out joined together. So sometimes you do have to fool around a little bit with a font. It's not just as simply as easy as typing it in and then choosing just weld. One last thing I want to show you, which is kind of a really fun thing, and that's how to create an offset title. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick this font called Wedding Chardonnay, and I'm going to type in the word everyday. And this one here has all the letters kind of overlapping, so I'm going to select it and then weld it together. And you can actually see it didn't actually weld everything. Some of the letters weren't matched up, like the V and the D weren't quite layered over enough. So I'm just going to weld it again. And probably one more time here. I must not have had the V overlapping properly. And now that it's one shape, I'm just going to fill this in so you can see what is going on here. Oh, the V still did not take, so I'm going to do it one more time. I'm going to weld it one more time. You really have to be careful that you have it overlapping just enough that that weld will take. Otherwise, you may have to do it a few times like this one. There we go. Okay, so now we have the word everyday, and I'm going to zoom in on it. And I'm going to now create make sure it's set to the cut edge for this. It should be cut edge, not cut. And I want to select an offset. So for this, I want to create an exterior offset. So I'm going to select the offset, and I'm just going to use the arrow key and click until I get an offset that goes all the way around the edge of the word so that I can still read it. And it punches out some of those little tiny details. And then I'm going to hit apply. And so I'm just going to move that one off to the side. You can still see it's the same word. It's just slightly thicker. And I'm going to fill it with a different color so you can kind of see how it would look. So at this point, you could leave it the way it is. But sometimes you have a font that's really scripted and you just want it to be a little bit wider. So you could use this as an option to do that. Or you might want to have your title and have your title with a nice offset around it, like an extra layer behind. So that's what you would do in this case. So you would cut both of them out of two different patterns of paper or pieces of cardstock. And then you could take it one step further and create a third overlay in the offset. And so don't make it quite as thin this time. You want to make it a little bit wider. And then if you hit apply, or make it a slightly thinner, actually, not quite as wide as the first one. And if you fill it with another, I'll fill it with another color so you can see what I mean. I'll pick the line the same color. And you can see it has a slight shadow to it, and then you can add your offset title in behind. So you actually have 3 different layers of paper that you could cut, and you'd make a super neat layered title. In really just minutes, it doesn't take long to create something like that. So let's go ahead and take a look at how you can apply some of these techniques using your page map sketch. So here is the use of that scribbly circle here, just layered and cut onto some vellum. And you can see the pie charts that we used on this page, and I just added some stitching detail to them. But it's a really fun way to use up your scraps again and make the most of your pattern paper in a really, really simple and fun, unique way. And here's that sketch that inspired that floral background, and you can see that there is a background cascading across your page. I've done a bit of an offset title here with the word smile, and you can again see the rings here and the different floral background paper layered with just simple patterns of paper in behind to create my final page. So that is it for week 4 of the Silhouette Essentials 101 class. Thank you so much from Page Maps and myself for joining us for this course. We hope you've enjoyed it, and stay tuned for Page Maps for more exciting online Page Map U courses and in sketches and inspiration. Have a great day.